So around when I started in spirituality, my mother was very involved with the United Church of Canada. And so we go every Sunday, and it was very nice. And we'd sing in the church, and we would yell our heads off because we didn't have any manners. And I'm embarrassed when I think about it now, but that's the way it was. And I like going to church. It was, but as I got older, when I was in my late teens and I was married, I liked to go to church. My wife didn't like to go to church, so she had to go to church all the time because she was Roman Catholic, and she had to go every Sunday with her mom, and early in the morning. So she didn't want to go, and as I didn't push her because it wasn't my faith, but when my kids were little, I always liked the kids going to church, and we would go from time to time, and I liked going to church. My wife didn't like me to get friendly with the priests, and then I'd give money, and she didn't like me to give them too much money, so because I didn't have a hell of a lot, but that's okay. And as a result, I never had much spirituality or feeling. And then I started reading some books about reincarnation, and there was a woman who wrote an awful lot of books. Her name was Ruth Montgomery, and I read lots of her books, and I was very enthused. And then I started getting into books about the Dalai Lama, and the Dalai Lama was really turned my crank because I really felt I was a Buddhist monk. And but what can you do? I'm married. I got 2 kids. I had a job that didn't allow me to travel, and that's what I wanted to do. But you can't when you get limited income, and your wife was not mentally agreeable. So I didn't press it. We just didn't do anything, and I've always wanted to buy a business. And I look and look and look, and I take off Saturday and Sunday, and I drive all around. Beaver Lumber Company wanted me to buy it right now, and the agreement was I would wait a year. And here I about 5 months, and he wanted me to buy the thing. So what was I to do? I went and bought it, and after I bought it, the business went right down the tube. So I I was sort of wishing that I hadn't bought it, but then I quit the job. There was no recourse about going back. And after I was there for a while, while I was first there, my wife didn't like the thing, and this is her home, so she decided to make a change, and she went and left me, and she had some problems for a few years. When I got to Edmonton, I started selling real estate because I had some friends that were doing extremely well in real estate. So I went there, and I did a fairly decent for the first while. But I had this desire to go to India, and I just decided that I was going to go to India, and I went to India for 6 months. My payments on my house were being done. Everything was being looked after. And I had a little bit of money in my bank, and I took that, and I went to India. My daughter was upset because she was only about 17, 18, and she thought I would never come back, but I really went to India. And that was a very trying time for me because I had certain things I wanted to do. And I went to India first, and then I went to Nepal, and I wanted to particularly deal with a fellow named Khensi Rinpoche, who was a great master, and I wanted to learn a particular type of meditation called Dzogchen. And I had this connection from previous lives, and the translation from Dzogchen is the great perfection. So I wanted to take this and wanted to take it from Khyentse Rinpoche, but he was in Bhutan, and I was waiting for him, and then he was ill, and then he died. So there, my chance of getting that initiation from him was void. A monastery just outside of Kathmandu. So I arranged getting my name and registered, and I went there. And here I'm sitting taking this meditation course, and I'm in a Buddhist monastery. And there's no chairs, there's nothing. And I've never sat on the floor for a week every day. No place to lean on. I was just really uncomfortable, but I managed to survive. And I wondered how much I really picked up when I was so uncomfortable. If you're uncomfortable, how can you really pick up? I was trying to meditate, and I had this voice say to me, "I'm here," and I knew who was here. I didn't know where he was, or I'd been waiting all my life for that call. I just knew it. And when I came back, I went to California to visit my daughter. And at the same time, the Dalai Lama was in Los Angeles. And that was something I wanted to do for many years. And I remember as he drove by in his limousine and he was going to speak at the Santa Monica. They had a big hall there, and there must have been 25,000 people there. And as he drove by in his car, I started to cry. That was a real highlight. And I stayed for the 7 days of the initiation, and I really enjoyed it. And he gave the initiation every day. We were at the end of the initiation. They were having a little group, and the fellow that was translating for the Dalai Lama as he spoke on this particular initiation, he spoke about this, and he was at this little ceremony where there was cocktails, and it wasn't liquor, but it was something, and he walked across, all these people were there, and the big hall and big crowd, and he was at one end of the hall and I was at the other end, and he came walking through the crowd, and it just opened up like cutting cheese, and he walked right up to me, and I was going right towards him, and I knew him from previous lives. He was teaching at the University of Virginia, so just like like it was preordained. He walked right through, and there was all kinds of people in between, and all we were interested in is each other. And I said that was a beautiful translation, and I'm not sure if I knew him in a previous life, but it was his name was Jeffrey Hopkins, and he was a very high scholar, and he'd become a monk in Dharamsala for a few years, and then he gave up the vows. But he was a very, very spiritual. So I came back to Canada, and I'd already known about Sai Baba. And when I came back to Canada, I was getting gas in my car, and a friend came up that was the one that had introduced me and explained something about Sai Baba. And right away, I wanted to go back to India and see Sai Baba. But I just got back to Canada, and my finances were very limited. And but I wanted to go back, and at that same time, my daughter had seizures, and I wanted to take her to see Sai Baba. So I asked her if she wanted to come, and with a little bit of arm twisting, she decided she'd come with me. And it was a wonderful trip. We were only there for 2 weeks, and but it was very lovely. There's nothing like the love that Sai Baba gives. When I got out of the plane and went to the hotel, and we're leaving in the morning at 2:30 or 3 o'clock, and I got into the taxi with my daughter, and we were going to put a party, and all the way there, I could feel this love, and it just got bigger and bigger. And I'd say to my daughter, I said, "Do you feel that?" And she'd look at me like I was. My daughter's name was Shirley, and I says, "Do you feel this love? Do you feel this love?" And when we got to the ashram, the love was so strong. I just left my bags and everything in the car, took my daughter, and we went into the ashram. And it just was wonderful. But, and he came walking across, doing his darshan, and I just didn't know what to say. I was so shy because of his majesty and his love. And he looked at me just for a second, and that was it. But it had enough impression that I was really wonderful struck with this Sai Baba. And we were there for the whole week, and we met many devotees. And my daughter, and she loved being in the ashram. She's a gregarious person and not like her father. And in the ashram, and I went to get a room, and in the ashram, and the people at the accommodations told me that the only thing that was available was a room in the shed. And I asked my daughter if she'd like to stay there, and she said no. So we were outside looking in the put-a party for a hotel room, which we got. And when I was walking around, I prayed to Sai Baba. I said, "Swami, I really want to stay in the ashram, but there's no room, so we're going to stay outside in the hotel." Well, we walked back in the ashram to get our luggage, and this old man came running up to me, and he says, "Are you from Canada?" And I said, "Yes." "Is that your daughter? She's from Canada?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Swami told me to give you a room." So I got a room. And that was very, very, very nice that he went, and my little prayer, that he answered it and gave me a room. So, and my daughter liked it. We had, at that time, and this was in the early 90s, we had to buy mattresses and, no blankets, because you never need a blanket in put-a party. At least I didn't. So we were there for a week, and it was very nice. And I wanted to go to Halagapa's place, who was a fellow that ran an orphanage in Mysore at Sri Rangapatna, and he materialized vibhuti and amarita. And so we went there, and he treated us so nice. But we had, again, a conversation problem, because he didn't speak very much English, and I sure didn't speak any Telugu. And but he was just so nice, and we got vibhuti and some amaret, and while we're sitting there meditating in the shrine room, Swami says to me, "In this next life, you'll be born in this ashram." And I told my daughter right away, I said, "Swami just told me that I'm going to be born here." And she looked at me like, "Dad, are you all right?" So, but I felt, and it was good for both of us to go to to India together, and particularly because I just myself and my ex-wife had just split up, and the children didn't have any, a cohesive family to call, mom and dad. So, but we did all right, at least I think. And she went back to Calgary, and I went to Edmonton. I continued with my thing, and I had asked when I was in Regina, I had to ask for a contact in Edmonton, and they gave me Sam Rao, and I phoned him up, and he introduced me to the Psi Center, and I just never looked back. Every time I was working, every time I went driving there, and I had to come late because I worked till after the service had started, and every time I came to the Sai Baba Center, I was embraced by this tremendous love. I can't tell you how it was the greatest thing that ever happened. Every day that I came back on Thursdays and Sundays, there was this love that I experienced that I didn't know what to say. I didn't even tell anyone. I just was so happy that I was experiencing this. So I continued on, and I belonged to the center and read about many things. And I went to India again, and I was sitting in the darshan lines, and a fellow that I'd met from Wales came up to me and he says, "Larry, here's a book you should read." And I looked at the book, and it was called Sai Baba and Patel Bhuvaneshwar. So when I got out of the ashram that night, I read a couple of pages, and I was so mesmerized by that. I went and found the guy because we're living in a shed, and he told me where he got it at Sai Tower. So I went over there and bought a couple of copies, and I really was a highlight. And after I was in the ashram, there was a fellow. He was flying back to Canada the next day. So we went out, made arrangements, and we went to Patel Bhuvaneshwar. And there was my friend Alexander Neil, and we and a Japanese woman, and we went together, and we traveled. We wanted to get a reading from the Book of Pragu, so we went and got a reading from the Book of Pragu, the three of us. And I phoned the general up from Mumbai, and I explained to the general, how do I get there to Rishikesh? And he says, well, you get on a bus. And he says, if you're not here in time, we'll leave without you. And I didn't want him to leave without me. So Neil and myself, we got a bus, and there was chickens and everything on the bus, but we got there on time. And we got out of the bus, and we were walking around, and he gave us some directions. So we went up to where he had some people guiding us. So I went up and I talked to this fellow. His name was Sharma, and I says, we're here to go with General Taylor tomorrow. And he says, now if you can get us a hotel. And this was the Kumbh Mela. No, we looked everywhere for a hotel, and we couldn't get one. And so I went back to Sharma, and I said to him, I said, I can't get a room for Neil and myself. Can you help us? And he says his wife was very psychic, and she always traveled with the general. So he phoned his wife, and the wife said immediately, she says, I've already talked to Swami, and he says that both of us should stay at their condominium. So we went to a condominium at Vishikari, probably up at 2, and I was dressed by probably 3, and I looked out the window. We were up on the 2nd or 3rd floor, and I see this man coming there, very impressive man, and he looked like a military person. And since I'd been in the military, I thought he was. And I see all these people coming up and talking to him and everything. And I says to Neil, let's go down and see this man. So we went down and I explained who I was, and he said to me, he says, Swami just told me that you and your friend Neil are supposed to come in our taxi, and I'll cancel these other two late people, a man and a woman. And I didn't. He says, Swami wants you to ride with me. So we got in the taxi, and we went from Rishikesh all the way to Patel, and we went through Burlili, and we stopped at the junction of the Ganges and the Sarayu River, and we all had a bath. It's supposed to be a great blessing. And, I'm new to this type of thing, so I wasn't the one that would stick my head under the water because the water was very polluted. Stayed in Burlili that night, and he got us some food that I'd never experienced, and it was so delicious. And then he got us a type of drink, a type of yogurt, and it was delicious. I never ever had that before. I had that. We got back in the morning. We went out and we stopped at another place where they had a floating lingam, and I don't know what that floating lingam means, but there was 20 some of us, and this woman from Australia, she says to General, she says, I can't stop shaking. She says, as soon as I walked into this place where the lingam is, I just can't stop shaking. And I said, I can't either. And the General says, it'll pass. And it did pass. And we were there and we did some pujas and everything. And then we got into our taxis, and all of a sudden I saw right in front of me is a leopard or a taxi. The taxis weren't going very fast. Roads were terrible. And there was an embankment sitting right beside the taxi, beside the road. I was so excited. I was pretty hysterical. I was telling General and Geeta and Neil that this leopard was there. And this leopard jumped up on the embankment, and we weren't 3 feet, 4 feet away from him. The leopard lifted up his paw and blessed us. And I never experienced anything like that before. And Geeta and General Taylor said that was Durga. It was just amazing, just fantastic. So we went to Patel, and we went running down to this cave. And I'd never been in the cave before or anything, but I had a little flashlight, and I just went down, and you had to crawl and different places. Once you got inside the cave, it was just spacious, like being in a great hall. And but I just went down without any qualms or anything. And we were going back downstairs, down into the cave, not downstairs. And he spaced us out through the cave. And he had electricity installed in the cave. So when we went down there was light. And when we went down for meditation, they spaced us out throughout this cave. And it's a huge cave. And we were only in the first layer, and there's 6 more layers that we never ever got to see. And he got us to go into meditation. And I don't know why, but my meditation improved remarkably. And I was sitting there, and as I was sitting there, right in front of me, within 2 or 3 inches, was Lord Shiva. And I just didn't know what to say. I just didn't say anything. And then there was Sai Baba, and then there was Lord Shiva, and then Sai Baba. And we were down in this cave, and all of a sudden it was so dark, and then all of a sudden it became sort of light. And there was all these other deities down there. There was sort of like they were all coming down to get darshan. And it was amazing. And then the meditation was finished, and the General took us back up, and I told the General what I experienced. Oh, he said, that's nothing. He says, you've been here so many times that it's an automatic thing for you to see these deities. And I said, I swear there were so many deities. And he says, they were all here. All the deities they were invited, and it's the first time since I've been coming here that they were all. So that's where it was. And then that night he did a puja outside, and this fellow, another Sharma, he did doing the puja, and we had doing a havan. And when they were doing the havan, I saw all these deities in the flames, and Sharma says to me, "You see them?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, "That's exceptional." So I was very, very blessed, and the whole experience of coming to India changed my whole life. It was hard to work and everything when all I wanted to do was go back to India. And I didn't have the funds to do anything, but we managed to get there just about every year. It was basically me, and it wasn't that expensive. And when I stayed in Puttaparthi, it was always so nice, and it was just wonderful. So I came back to Canada, and I had continued to have experiences, and I've been praying to Swami for my mother to be able to get the darshan of Swami when she passed on, because my mother was schizophrenic, and she's had a terrible life. And it wasn't, I didn't help it any, because I didn't know how to accept a person that acted strange. But I prayed to Swami to please, Swami, when she passes on, could you make sure when she's born that she gets your darshan? And sometime later, when I was doing my meditation, Swami came in my meditation, and I saw him in the darshan lines, and Swami was walking through the women's side, and he came to this woman who held up this child. And then Swami said, "That child was your mother in your previous life." So that was I couldn't ask for anything better than to have my mother receive the darshan of our Lord. And that meant so much to me. And I think that put me on a high. I don't know. I think I was flying for a couple of days, but it's very lovely to have Swami. And he only ever said one word to me other than in my meditation. But if I was in the ashram, he'd walk by me and ignore me. So that's okay. I just knew he knew I was there. And I did so many things that happened that I'm just trying to recollect the ones that have happened in the last few years. That it's just phenomenal that I've got all these experiences. And the reason that I had all these experiences, General Taylor told me that I'd been in India in many previous lives, and I'd been in Patel Bhuvaneshwar in many lives. And an awful lot of these people that I were with at the ashram were with me in previous lives, so I had no recollection. And I just had this wonderful, wonderful experiences. Nothing in the world could buy these experiences. He just treated me. He ignored me as a person, but he bestowed all these blessings to me, and never said anything that he was doing that. But the only reason I could get him is because of his grace and his love. And I followed the Buddhist path, and after that, I had very little desire to go to the Buddhist thing anymore. All I wanted to go to the Sai Baba Center, and I would experience all this love every time I walked in. For the first year or two, every time I walked in, it was like I was embraced by this beautiful love. There's nothing compared with Swami's love. Absolutely nothing. And I've had so many experiences. I just can't think of them all right now, but I just think that being with Swami, just to go to his ashram, is a great gift.